Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Julie.
So today, in celebration of October 5th, World Teachers Day, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I know you love teachers. I want to ask you a little bit about, first and foremost, if you could tell me about some of the teachers who made a big difference in your life when you were growing up.
Well, I think we all have teachers that have impacted our lives, and I've had a few. Um, but I want to talk about one in particular. He was my art teacher when I was in grade 10. And at the time I was in Winnipeg, uh, going to school in French in St. Boniface. And the school was Collège Louis Riel. And the teacher's name was Gosselin, Monsieur Gosselin. And I was brand new to the school. I had been to many schools before, but this was the first school where everything was in French, totally in French. And I loved drawing. Art was one of my favorite subjects. I practiced a lot. I thought I was really good at it. And Monsieur Gosselin would critique me all the time. He'd say, well, this area is not very good. You can work on this. You can do this better. And that actually really bothered me. I had never had an art teacher critique me before. It was always like, oh, that's wonderful, Heidi. But Monsieur Gosselin critiqued me. But what I learned through that was to develop my drawing even further. But at first, I didn't like being critiqued by him, and it really bothered me. And it really helped me later in life as well, because when I went to University of Laval in fine arts, let me tell you that you get critiqued. And Monsieur Gosselin is somebody who had introduced me to the whole wonderful world of being critiqued. And it was really later in life that I discovered that he's the one that kind of introduced me to that and made me feel much more comfortable with having my work critiqued. So I think what the little bit of a lesson was in that case was that sometimes teachers influence us, but we only discover it really later in life. And the other thing that Monsieur Gosselin did was he introduced me to performance art. And when I went into studying to become a teacher, that was what I decided to do in my grade 11 class, was to do performance art with my students. And performance art is very unusual. And so if you think about it, in the 80s, Monsieur Gosselin was being very avant-garde, getting his grade, it was a split class, grade 10 and 11 class, to do performance art. And I'll never forget it. It was the most amazing experience of my life. It was the most bizarre experience of my life. And I wanted to allow my students to experience that too. It's thinking outside of the box. It's doing things that are really unusual. So through Monsieur Gosselin, I learned about performance art, loved performance art. It became a really important part of my class in grade 11 when I taught. And I actually used performance art when I did my master's in art education as well.
Wow, he sounds like he was an amazing teacher. It sounds like he, in a lot of ways, took you, when you were a student as well, he took you out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And I didn't like it at first. I was like, I don't like this art teacher. He's telling me that my work isn't good. But it was the opposite of that. You realize later on that he's really is taking you outside your comfort zone and making you look at things completely different, right?
And if he did that, it's because he saw the potential in you. He said, I can tell her that so she can improve.
Yeah, but at the time I didn't think that.
Well, I think it's a tough pill to swallow, but when you think, anyway, for myself, when I think back on my life, critique, there's always truth in it. And it's like, oh yeah, as long as it makes you look inside and say, what do I need to do here? And there's always some truth to it. I think critique and the hard times, nobody likes hard times, but those are the moments when you grow, really, when you have the opportunity for change.
Absolutely. When you're uncomfortable, that's
when you're uncomfortable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about a couple of my favorite teachers, because I had some amazing teachers. When I was in grade 1, I had to switch schools. And I remember I was very nervous. We had just moved to a new neighborhood and I was changing schools and I was feeling very nervous. And the grade 1 teacher I had, essentially, she was like a mom. She was like a mom at school. And I was so grateful for her. And yeah, Mrs. LaRoche, her name was. And I ended up doing a stage with her when I was at university.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah. And she was still like that. She was still a mom all those years later to all her students. An amazing.
It's so hard on students when they move from school to school. And I did that quite a bit when I was growing up.
Oh, yeah. It made me very nervous.
Yeah. And I was a shy student, believe it or not. But I think in the long run, from learning to adjust in a new school is what allowed me to be a bit more flexible and maybe easier going when it comes to change.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Nobody likes it, but we can benefit from it in many times.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I had Mrs. Cat. She was a music teacher. Well, she taught grade 2, but she always had a guitar and she was always singing in class and she just brought magic to everything. So I loved her. And Mrs. Warbanks taught me the love of reading. It was the first teacher. She used to read all the time. She'd read to us in grade 5 and she would give us time to read in class. And I think it was the first time I really got into reading something that wasn't an Archie comic book at the time. I was reading Little House on the Prairie and I loved it. And it was because of her. She really inspired and she instilled in me the love of reading, which I still have today.
That's amazing. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last one I'll speak about, even though I've had many, was Mr. Jones in high school. He was my drama teacher. What an amazing human being. He would just see the light in everybody and made everybody feel like he saw you, and he made the drama space a safe space and a fun space. And, you know, when you're in high school, sometimes school, it's math, it's not for everybody and all those things. But when you go to drama, everybody felt like they fit in and they could do something and shine. So I learned a lot from him too. So I've been very fortunate with my teachers as well.
Yeah, no, I had some really amazing teachers. My physics teacher, Monsieur Pellerin, really loved him. And the thing that I loved the most about him is the way he drew circles on the chalkboard. But when I went into university, there was a bunch of us from high school that would return to see him so that he could help us in physics at university, because we didn't like our physics teacher at university. So we were always knocking at his door after school. Hey, we're back. We need your help.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And now, in celebration of teachers, I mean, when we think of the past year and a half, everything that teachers have been through, teachers have shown over and over again how they are superheroes, especially given the pandemic. And if you could just maybe speak about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh, these last almost 2 years now have been super hard. And I've talked to a lot of teachers about that. I think some of the hardest things is to kind of get those protocols in place, those sanitary measures, and to see kids falling behind. You know, I remember once when I visited a school, this was before the pandemic, I was talking to a teacher who ended up just breaking down in tears. And she said to me, you know, I want my students to learn. I want them to get everything that they can, and I just can't do it. There's students in my class that I just can't reach. And it's so important for teachers to see kids like moving ahead. And the pandemic has really pulled children back. And I'm sure that's been tough on the teachers in the classroom. But I think the other thing that's been really difficult is the online learning. I mean, we've learned, if there's one thing we've learned, is that to be in presence and relationships between the teacher and the students and students is so essential in education. And a lot of teachers have told me that it was almost like they were teaching for the first time in their life. That it was like starting all over again. Even seasoned teachers that have been teaching for, 10, 12, 13 years said it was like I was like in my first year teaching, because online teaching and in-present teaching are two completely different worlds.
Mhm.
And you just can't just, there you go, we've just changed this to online. It's not as simple as that. So teachers have been spending hours and hours of work, probably on the weekends and in the evenings, trying to get online, lesson plans ready for their students. So that has been really hard. But teachers, they're amazing. They're amazing people. They stepped up to the challenge. They were there for their students. They created this kind of sense of normalcy that students really needed. And they worked tremendously hard. But I think they also started to realize a few things about their jobs, probably to see that it was important to have joy in their day, that it was important that teaching isn't just about filling brains with knowledge. It's more than that. It's about, like I said before, relationships and laughing and playing and all those things that are really important. They love what they do. Teachers love what they do. They love their students. They always go above and beyond. And I remember when I was the Pearson Teachers Union president, I used to get phone calls of teachers that were exhausted. And this is before the pandemic. And I would say, well, what are you doing to make yourself so exhausted? And they'd say, well, I'm on this committee and I do this and I run this and I do this. And I said, you don't have to do it all. You can say no, but teachers have a hard time saying no. Yes. And I'm hoping that, the pandemic has kind of shown them that they need to take care of themselves. They need to be healthy in order to be doing the job that they're doing, because it's such an important job. And I'm hoping the pandemic has helped them realize that there's more to it. They also have to take care of their own well-being.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. If something positive can come out of it, that would be one of them for sure. Making choices, you don't have to say yes to everything. And maybe some years you say yes to some things and other years you say yes to other things, but you don't have to do it all. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, maybe a little message for teachers on World Teachers Day. That would be wonderful.
So just to give you a little bit of background on World Teachers Day. So it's held annually on the 5th of October, and I have to read it because I want to make sure I get this right. It's to celebrate teachers around the globe. So it's World Teachers Day. It's concerning the status of teacher, and it was adopted in 1966 by UNESCO, which sets benchmarks regarding the rights and responsibility of teachers and standards for their initial preparation and further education. So 1.5 years into the COVID crisis, the 2021 World Teachers Day for UNESCO focuses on the support that teachers need to fully contribute to the recovery process under the theme Teachers at the Heart of Education Recovery. Also, QPAD is a member organization, belongs to the Canadian Teachers Federation, and therefore we also belong to Education International, which represents over 32 million teachers around the world in 178 countries. And this year for World Teachers Day, they are paying tribute to colleagues that have been lost during the pandemic. I think that this year, World Teachers Day is even more significant considering the effects of the pandemic on the teaching profession. If you think of healthcare workers, they've been regarded as the guardian angels during COVID-19. And a majority of them are women in the public sector who are working super hard to protect those who are sick. And we, of course, salute them. But we also have to think about us, our turn, teachers. It's important not to forget the women and men that are in caregiving jobs, because teachers are in caregiving jobs as well. And I believe that we are also the guardian angels of this pandemic. We need to value teachers in the future. The pandemic has really shown the importance of education. And so I'm hoping that governments will remember what went on in the last 2 years. And I hope that they invest in the public sector workers of the future. Naomi Klein wrote this book called Shock Doctrine. And it's basically saying when there's a shock to the system, governments have a tendency to put in policy that are not policies that are not good for people, but that are good for themselves. So it's up to us, the public, to keep an eye on governments to make sure that the policies they put into place are going to help people. And that's what teachers do every day. They help people, and we need to invest in them. Their jobs are super, super important.
Oh, absolutely. And we will leave you today. I want to read you the quote from the Canadian Teachers Federation. So the message for all teachers on World Teachers Day 2021. Celebrating teachers, we see you, value you, and applaud you. Happy World Teachers Day, everybody.
Happy World Teachers Day.